What's up, everybody? Matthew here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. So last night we had a prayer vigil here at Gospel Fellowship PCA for the tragedy at Covenant Presbyterian Church in Nashville. No doubt everybody is now aware of the shooting that just took place on Monday. A tragic shooting in which 6 Christians were killed by a woman, 28 years old, Audrey Hale, who identifies as transgender. This is a startling turn of events. And what I want to talk to you about today a little bit is the so-called manifesto that this individual had written before committing these heinous and violent murders. Specifically, I want to push for the release of the manifesto. I really believe that the public needs to know exactly what it is that's motivating this type of violence, and we need to know immediately. Thank you so much for checking into this channel. Again, my name is Matthew Everhard. I'm the pastor here at Gospel Fellowship PCA. We are a Reformed, Bible-believing church just north of Pittsburgh. If you're looking for a church like that, please come check us out, Gospel Fellowship PCA. So we need to push for the release of the manifesto, and it has to happen very early. It has to happen as soon as possible. Here are at least 6 reasons why this needs to take place. First, number 1, the ongoing danger that could be tied to and connected with this particular act of terrorism. This is certainly terrorism. There's no question about that. We could call it trans terrorism. We could call it by any other name that we want to, but we need to know the motivation for this. In fact, one of the things that we need to understand is whether or not there is more danger that is lurking just beneath the surface of this particularly heinous event. In other words, we need to know, is there an ongoing string of sort of these vengeance reprisals that are about to happen? The public needs to know if that's true. Were there any other co-conspirators that are participants in this event, or was it a single operation by this Audrey or Aiden Hale? Now, at the moment, what we know is that it seems to have been perpetuated by a single terrorist individual, sort of a lone wolf situation, but we don't know that for sure. In fact, one of the things that the manifesto might reveal is whether or not there is a terror cell that is involved in this. And if that's true, then the public has every right to know this as soon as possible, to know whether or not there is more danger coming and what acts or events we can put together to brace ourselves for this kind of violent domestic terrorist impact. So we need to know whether or not there's more danger coming. Number 2, we must know, and this is non-negotiable, whether this act of violence was perpetrated because the school was a Christian school. Now, every assumption that we have points in that direction. When we look at the targeting of this particular place, when we look at the timing, when we look at the other places that were considered, when we looked at the possibility of the connection between this terrorist and this school, everything I have read indicates that this person attended the school when they were younger. What sort of resentments are there? Why was this particular school targeted? Many people believe it was because of their Christian faith, their strong Bible-believing evangelical Christian faith. Moreover, many people, including myself, have a very strong hunch that the specific targeting of this violent act was because of conservative Bible-believing Christianity. The PCA is a sister denomination to us here at Gospel Fellowship. I'm sure you're already aware that the Presbyterian Church in America, the PCA, is a strong conservative Bible-believing, confessional, historically moored manifestation of the Reformed Christian faith. It is a strong denomination for the most part. We do have our weaknesses, of course. We do have our controversies, of course. But the PCA has strongly held the line when it comes to issues of biblical gender and sexuality. And of course, there have been some debates in recent years about these things. Every denomination is talking about these issues. But for the most part, the PCA has very strongly held the line about biblical sexual ethics and morality. Our confessions are strong. Our statements that we've made at recent General Assemblies are conservative and strongly pro-family for the most part. And we need to know, was this a motivation? In fact, was the PCA specifically chosen because of our confessional, biblical, and conservative groundings? Not only that, but there is a really strong question lurking here in dark and nefarious places, and that is, was the daughter of the pastor specifically targeted for this act of terrorism? Now, when you look at the 6 people that were killed in this event, it seems to indicate to us that there was some particular individuals that might have been gone after. We don't know that for a fact, and I'm not asserting it to be true. But the fact that the principal was killed and the fact that the pastor's daughter was specifically named amongst the dead tragic for all of us who are pastors. Many of us in the PCA, we are deeply grieved and concerned about this reality. And Pastor Chad Scruggs and his wife Jada, our hearts are moved with pity and compassion for them. Our hearts are swelling with love for you. But one of the dark questions that we need to have answered is whether or not the pastor's family was specifically targeted. If so, that indicates a very strong ramping up of the demonic darkness of these kinds of events happening in our own day and time. Third, we need to expose the worldview of the terrorist here that brought about these particular kinds of events. Now, almost as soon as the individual's identity was known, questions began to emerge related to this person's gender, sexuality, claims of transgenderism, etc. And one of the primary concerns here that we need to understand as a public is what ideology specifically drove this person to do the things that they did on Monday. This particular ideology is dangerous, it is secular, it is atheistic, it is violent, it is vengeful, and that needs to be exposed for what it is. Now, let's hold out the logical possibility as well that this was simply a mentally deranged person who happened to be a transgender individual. And perhaps it's true that their particular beliefs when it comes to sexual deviancy and perversities had nothing to do with the targeting of this particular church school. However, it does not seem like that to many people that have sort of an objective look at these things. We need to have this ideology exposed for what it is. It is dark, it is lonely, it is vengeful, it is revengeful, and the public needs to be aware of this. And if there is any sense in which the local government, the local police operations there, or the federal FBI, CIA, whatever, are going to try to hide these things from the public, that would be a very deep injustice to the public here, the citizens of the United States of America. We need to see this ideology exposed for what it is. Fourth, the manifesto has to be released because of the possibility of prevention strategies. Now, obviously, this individual had scouted out the school. She knew certain things about it. Apparently, she had attended it. Apparently, from what we've heard in the media, there were maps and other such drawings that indicated how she was going to do it, that she had considered even a different school and didn't hit that one up because of the stronger security there. But listen, I think we all know that since Columbine, these kinds of school shootings have been very much the subject of copycatist type events. And if there is any sense in which this manifesto exposes the strategy of how to attack such schools, where their weaknesses are, and why certain schools could be preferred as targets over others, then the public very much needs to know that. Because, unfortunately, one of the things that we learn through these tragedies is how to stop them in the future. So one of the things that we saw that was interesting in this particular event was the shooting through of the glass. Now, the doors were locked, and this is different from the Uvalde case, which just happened several months ago, where apparently a door was left open. This school, Covenant School, at least had the doors locked and seems to have had safety protocols in measure, but nevertheless, that high-powered rifle was able to obliterate the glass in the front doors. And so therein is a particular strategy that churches and schools and other such things can learn from, so that we can redouble our efforts to keep our people safe. That's very important. And so if in any sense this manifesto gives away some clues as to the strategy to attack, it also therein gives strategies by which we can defend our schools and our churches as well. So the public needs to know this information, and it needs to know it as soon as possible. Fifth, we need to be able to continue to identify the profile of these kinds of shooters. Now, one of the things that was immediately very, very interesting to many commentators about this is that this seems to defy the regular profile of what we've seen in these school shooters. Very often these are lone wolf type individuals, very typically male, very typically loners, very typically those who have difficulty associating with others, especially females. The kinds of person that live very dark, desperate, and lonely lives. And yet this person kind of breaks the mold. And very interestingly, the reports that she was a teenage girl, of course, that was false. We knew that she was later a female adult woman. biologically, that broke the mold of what this profile looks like. And so this case is going to be very, very interesting, because we need to know what factors specifically led this particular person to this kind of demonically oriented madness, such as that they would perpetrate these kinds of horrible and almost unspeakable crimes. And so one of the factors that seems to need to be explored is the connection to this person's transgenderism. Does this lead to a vengeful and violent worldview? Well, there are suggestions that that might be true. In fact, the correlation between transgenderism and Antifa, which is a violent anti-society, anti-order, organizational societal movements, is pretty strong. In fact, if you look at some of the reporting of Andy No, he's a reporter that tends to focus on Antifa. He has indicated that a very strong correlation exists between transgender individuals and Antifa anarchists and their societal mayhem. And so that profile needs to be further understood. Moreover, it has to be understood whether or not there's a connection here to the hormones that this person may have been taking. Many of us very strongly believe that the kinds of hormones, the kind of puberty blockers and things like this, that the transgenderism movement is very strongly encouraging, that those things have highly detrimental and dangerous effects on the body as well as the mind, and that needs to be understood. Therefore, the manifesto has to be released. And then finally this, it better be released quick, because I have a very strong suspicion that the government is going to try to cover this up as much as possible. So it would be preferential that the local police and local authorities would be able to release this manifesto to the public, get it online quick, before the unfortunately the overseen governmental agencies at a federal level will try to whitewash this. They will try to memory hole this particular event, especially with its connections to the LGBTQ movement, to transgenderism in general, and especially with its relationship, if at all, to Antifa-type anti-societal violent organizations. This needs to come out, it needs to be known, and it has to be done now. So if anybody is in a position in which they could make some sort of public information request act, or if anybody has any connections to local authorities, keep the pressure on, release the manifesto. Thanks for checking in. Love you lots. We'll talk to you later.